What's up, guys? In this video we're going to be installing a 1.5 inch lift kit on my 3rd gen 4Runner and also installing some Bilstein 4600 shocks, and I've got new springs for the rear because if you can't tell, it's sagging pretty bad in the rear. Then I've also got some 1-inch KSP wheel spacers. This lift kit is from eBay. I forgot the company. Let me see here. Yeah, Daystar. So here's the instruction manual. It's a Daystar spacer lift. That just shows you the instructions there, and I guess that's what it should look like after. But the reason I'm doing a 1.5 inch lift instead of like a 2 or a 3 is because the stock upper control arms and like the panhard bar in the rear don't need to be changed if I'm only doing a 2 inch or under. And I figured I just needed a little bit to get a little bit more clearance if I'm doing a little bit of off-roading, or if I have the car loaded down to get a little bit more clearance and whatnot before bottoming out. So that's why I'm doing this, just because it needs new shocks and springs anyway, so I might as well throw a small lift in there. So here are the rear spacers. They're just like some polyurethane or some sort of material that's like pretty hard and rigid but relatively soft, that will go on the top of the spring like that and act as a lift. And then in the front it's got these spacers that will bolt on and go in there to lift it up. So I'm going to be starting in the rear because I'm going to be doing the front lower control arm bushings while I'm in there. That's going to take a lot longer. I don't have time for that tonight, so I'm going to go ahead and start on the rear and get the rear lift going. I know the shocks are a big pain to get out for that top bolt, but hopefully they're not that bad. I need to get everything soaking in some PB Blaster, so I'm going to go ahead and jack the rear up and get the wheels off so that I can get the spacers on for one thing, and then also start getting everything soaking and see how I can remove everything. So car is jacked up, wheels are off. I jacked it up by the diff and then put the why am I jack stands? I don't know why I forgot what that was called. Put those on the frame and then took the wheels off and then lowered the axle back down. And then what you have to do is remove the end links, which I did pretty easily. Just put some PB Blaster, hit them with a torch, and took them out right there with just a 12mm ratcheting box wrench. Got those out on both sides, and then after I did that, I removed the lower shock bolt here, just using a breaker bar and then a ratchet, and then I had to use this mallet to hammer it out this way, and now that's all loose and this is dangling down. And now I have the fun part, probably the worst part of this whole job, is taking the top bolt off of here, which is like impossible to get to. So let me crawl under here and show you. You can see up in there, there's a shiny ratchet. I've already tried, focus. I've already tried getting my hand up in there and using the ratchet, and it is impossible. So what I did was I put the ratchet on the bolt and then put my hand through this hole and got it pressed up against the frame. And then now I'm on the outside, just grabbing it. These channel locks. I had a second thought of what that was called. I'm just grabbing it here and then just twisting lefty-loosey, and it is very slowly but surely coming out, and eventually it's going to drop out and I can go ahead and put the new one up in there, which that should be a little easier because I'll just bolt it in down there and then I'll just thread the nut on. and then get it as tight as I can with the ratchet up there. I'm going to thread it on hopefully by hand and then be able to just tighten it a couple, like a little partial bit of a turn. Hopefully that will be good, but we'll see once I get there. So I got this one out. Once I figured out a rhythm to it, it actually wasn't too bad. It only took me like 5 minutes, but you can see this shock has been leaking. It has dents in it. The bushing that was in the bottom of it is totally blown out. So no wonder this car is rode awfully in the back. But yeah, there's that. So I'm going to go ahead and get the new one bolted in on the bottom first. You know, just putting in the bushings in the right order and slipping it on there, and then putting on, I believe it's, maybe not, I don't think that's right. I don't know. These washers go on there in a certain way, and I'm going to probably also research how to do that the right way first, and then get the bottom bolted on there and get the hole going through on the top, and then hopefully it can kind of jack the bottom up so that this stays in place inside the car, and then just tighten down the threads on the top, and hopefully it won't be that bad as taking it out. So here's the order it goes back up in there. You've got the thicker washer and the bushing, and then this thinner centering washer will go on like that, and then you'll put it in the car and the car will be there. Then you'll put this bushing there with another one of the thicker bushings or thicker washers, and then you'll put the nut on. So I'm going to go ahead and put mine up in the car and do that. So I got this shock on. It was actually pretty easy. I could reach the ratchet up in there just fine to tighten it because this thread was in a lot better shape. So I went ahead and got it snugged down until the bushing was squeezing a good amount. And then I went ahead and just put this one in down here. Super easy. Just put the same washers in the exact same stock orientation using the stock hardware and everything. And I just added in the Bilstein bushings. So those are all good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and do the other side shock, and then we will get into putting in the springs and the spacers. And then I also put on the wheel spacers here from KSP. I got them on Amazon. They had really good ratings. Couldn't find any reviews of, you know, people having them break or whatnot like the cheap ones. So I went ahead and put those on, got them on with some, I used a wire brush to clean all the rust off, and then got all the bolts put in with some thread locker and torqued them down. So those are all good to go. So now we're going to move on to getting the shock out on the other side and putting the new one in. Okay, so this shock is in as well. It was not as easy. This one was really weird. It would not like the part up there, the tube that's actually in here, or like the shaft of the shock wouldn't stay. So when I was turning the bolt, the whole thing in there was just spinning and it wasn't tightening when I was turning the nut up at the top. On the other one, it just stayed, so I was able, it was really easy. I just put the ratchet up there, tightened it, and it was good to go. On this one, I had to pop the blue cover down, which is just snapped on there. So if you just pull it down, it comes down and there's the shaft there. So I grabbed it with some channel locks or vice grips up at the top, and I just clamped them on there and left them, and then put them on there tight, and then went ahead and tightened it, and it held it when it just butted up against the frame. And then I was able to tighten it just fine until the bushing squeezed, and it didn't even leave a mark on the shaft. But also at the very top, that's not really even getting used anyway, so it doesn't really matter if it nicks it a little bit. So now they're all in there good. Now what I'm going to do is put the springs in. I'm going to try to get them in by putting the jack in between the axle and the bump stop here and pushing it to where there's enough space to put the new spring in with the lift spacer. And if there's not enough space, I'm just gonna have to use a spring compressor tool to compress the spring, then put it in there and then release it. But hopefully I don't have to do that because it's a little bit more work. And then I've just got these bolts down here tight, and then we will torque those once the car is actually on the ground, because you don't want to be putting stress on these bushings here. So I'll torque those once it's on the ground. But yeah, everything is good to go. I'm gonna work on getting the springs in. Alright, so I got the springs with the lift spacers in on both sides. It really wasn't that bad. The easiest way I found out to do it was just remove the bottom of the shock here. And on the other side it was super easy because it just droop all the way down. And on this side I just put the OEM bottle jack right here and lowered it until I could fit them in. And then I just used the jack where it is right now on the diff to align these and get them bolted in. And then I was all good to go. Then I lifted it a little bit higher, and so I could lift the sway bar in and get the end links tightened down. So now I'm gonna lift it up high enough to where I can put the wheels back on, and we'll get it on the ground. And then once it's on the ground, I'll torque the bottom of the shocks, and then we'll be done with the rear. So it is on the ground, and I'm used to it having sagging springs, so I haven't gotten a good idea of the lift, but it is definitely a lot higher. I totally forgot to measure it before, so actually, while I'm thinking about it, let's go ahead and measure the front. Even though the rear lift probably did affect the front a little bit, this will be better than nothing. That was way too much of this tape measure here. So from the ground to the top of the fender, if I center it in the wheel, we're looking at just under 35 inches. So we will see if it's around 36 and a half whenever we do the front. But yeah, I'm liking how it looks a lot more, especially with the spacers and it not being sunken in. It's pretty much flush, so it's perfect. It's a little bit misaligned just because of since it's a solid rear axle, you can see this side pokes just a little bit, but that's not the end of the world. Eventually I can get a pan-hard correction kit and probably fix that, but also the springs have to settle and stuff. So I'm gonna go ahead and crawl under there and torque the shocks, and then probably take it on a test drive, and then we'll move on to the fronts. I now have the front lifted up, and I'm going to be removing these shocks. So I need to get some PB Blaster in here soaking, and on this, that bolt's rusty. I'm going to take that out to get the top hat off, so that we can replace the shock in here. And then once I get the shocks out, which should be pretty easy, we got to get to removing the control arms, which I think will be a little bit of a harder task. But I'll have to mark my alignment on there, and then get in there and get those off, because I am pretty sure that those bushings are bad. I'm going to get in there and inspect them, and if they happen to not be bad, I'm not going to worry about it, because I really do not want to mess with those. But it's definitely showing the symptoms where when I press on the brakes, it kind of pulls to one side, and that's typically what happens because, you know, you're getting that movement in there. So I'm going to go ahead and get the shocks out for starters, and then see what needs to happen next. So the shocks are out. It was a pretty easy job to do. I did need to use my torch a little bit, and the old, like, you know, connecting two box wrenches trick to get those top ones out. Mine weren't even that rusted. They're just on there really tight because I know these have been replaced before. But they definitely need it again, because you can see these bushings are totally worn out, and In retrospect, I should have bought new top hats, because you can see that rubber is really dried out, but I'll probably just order some more of those and have them on hand, because it's not too hard to take these out and replace those at some point. Then here are the new ones from Bilstein. It looks like they come with a new bolt for attaching the top hat, and then this is the spring perch here, which just slides down and sits there. So I have a little eBay spring compressor kit here that I'm going to put onto this and compress it, and then I can take the top hat off and then swap the springs and top hats and these rubber isolators over to the new shocks. Alrighty, so got the springs and top hats onto the new shocks. It was not that bad of a job. It's pretty sketchy. I did buy the cheapest spring compressor that I could find, but it did the job just fine. You know, this goes here, and then you just, you know, put it around the spring like that, and then tighten it down until the spring's compressed. And then the top hat and spring on mine didn't even separate because they've been stuck together for so long. So I just moved the whole spring over, put it on there. Make sure you put the rubber bushing bump stop on this side. Then there's one with a washer that goes on this side. And then you use the new Bilstein 4600 spring seats here at the bottom, which I just realized I did not get this one totally straight in there, but I imagine over time it'll work itself out. And then here's the 1.5 inch lift spacer on the top. Just goes on there and then uses the OEM bolts or the OEM nuts, and then it comes with some bolts that you put in the top to hold it in there. So I'm going to go ahead and slap these in. I got the spacers put on. Now how we get these to fit in is using the OEM bottle jack. You put it like this up inside the fender well and the upper control arm, and then loosen it and push this down, and that will give you some more space to fit this in there. So I'm going to put it in there and then thread the bolts in at the top, and then I'll use my jack to lift the wheel up until I can put the bolt in here, and then we'll just get it in and thread it in, and then we'll lower the car on the ground, and then once the car is on the ground, that's when we will torque this bolt here, because you don't want to torque it while it's in the air. You want to torque it at its resting position so that there's no leftover stress being put on your rubber bushing there. So the shocks are back in, as you can see, nice Bilstein yellow in there. I decided to take the lift off because I could not get them in there. I had that jack totally maxed out inside there on top of the castle nut in there, and it would not fit in there. I don't know what I was doing wrong. I think I have to disconnect the upper control arm and all that stuff to get enough space in there, but I didn't really want to do that because when I started thinking about it, I don't want the rear of the car to be sagging to make it look kind of squatted. So based on how it was sitting before I replaced the shocks, I don't really think it needs the lift in the front right away. And I think what I'm going to do is order a 1-inch front lift instead of 1.5, because it's not one of these where you bolt it on there and bolt it on there too. It's just like a ring with just the 3 holes, and it goes over the top hat studs, and then you just bolt it in there. So it should be a lot easier to get in, and I don't need a ton of lift. I'm probably going to take this car camping and have a bunch of stuff in the back, so I'd like it to sit pretty even. So I kind of like the idea of a little bit less of a lift in the front. It may not really matter because it's 1/2 inch, but it'll make it easier to get in, and it'll put less stress on the suspension ball joints and geometry and whatnot. So I'm going to go ahead and lower it down, and we will see what it looks like. I expect it to sit a little higher in the front than it did anyways, because the bushings aren't blown out and it's got a new shock, but we'll see. So here is what it looks like. I guess you can't really tell because it's pretty dark, but it's actually sitting higher in the front, and I know it has to settle and I'm on like a slight slope of a driveway, so there's a little more weight in the rear, but it actually might have been a good decision not to install the spacers, because it would have definitely looked squatted, and that is not what I wanted. That's what I'm trying to fix with replacing the shocks and everything. So hopefully it'll look alright once settled, and if not, I'll just get one of those little spacers for the front, and that should probably solve it. Later down the line, I might do like a bigger lift and then do the front control arms and all that, but not at this point. So that's pretty much it for this video. If you're doing just the shocks and the rear lift to fix your squat, then it's a pretty easy deal. It's pretty easy install, and with the cost of these Bilstein 4600s, it is definitely worth it. It's better than whatever crap was in this car. I don't know. The rear looked like it might have been OEM. The front was definitely replaced before, so I don't really know. But I think I got the 4 shocks for like $270 on a like verified seller on eBay. So it is definitely a good deal. As soon as I installed the rears and drove on them for a few days before I had time to install the fronts, it already rode a lot better. So I'm really looking forward to driving it like this. But that's pretty much it for this video. Please leave a like and subscribe, and stay tuned for future 4Runner videos, and I'll see you in the next video.